Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our base this afternoon. It's trying to get warmer, but still a little bit chilly. We are celebrating. Are we celebrating? We are recognising Strangles Awareness Week, a really important initiative across all of the equine charities to draw attention to a disease that can disrupt in the most awful way. As part of that, some of the bigger charities got together and have been giving out thermometers so that people can take the temperature of their horse. And there have been several videos showing a little bit about taking temperatures, but don't necessarily explain how things can go awry, or if your horse isn't terribly fond of having things poked around its bottom. So we're just going to cover a couple of things that we take in mind. Betty here has been on box rest for a couple of lameness issues, and we thought it's handy because female horses have slightly more going on under their tails than male horses, and some people do get a little bit confused, so we'll look at the absolute basics. So in terms of taking rectal temperature, which it is, we're going to be inserting a thermometer into her rectum. Try and think, and obviously the opening to her digestive tract, or the exit to her digestive tract, is right here under her tail, and then the rectum, sort of think of it as running parallel to the floor, if you like. And it varies amongst horses, and the older they get, things get a little bit saggy. It's inevitable with all of us, but think of that tube that is the end of her digestive tract as running parallel to the ground, and then you'll not go far wrong as you insert. Because I think a lot of people get frightened of actually the inserting part of the thermometer. The bottom line is the area under a horse's tail is pretty sacred to most horses. It's not something they appreciate, people poking around their nether regions, and it's actually a part of the horse that they can't reach themselves, they can't itch themselves, their tail's in the way as protection. And some horses cause themselves some pretty nasty injuries when they're scratching their bottoms, and pieces of wood and heaven knows what have been dug out of horses' derrieres. So for the most part, if you're dealing with a horse that has not had its tail lifted, even tail lifted, let alone something inserted in its rectum, you've got to be mindful of the fact that you're going into what the horse considers to be uncharted territory. So keep that in mind. I'll just move position. You've got a couple of options for actually lifting a horse's tail, and she is used to having a temperature taken. She's had a temperature taken before. She's got a little bit disturbed and bothered there by the horses pawing at the gate for attention. But you've got a couple of options, and certainly with a big horse it makes sense to draw the tail to one side. Now she's clamped it a little bit there, and I'll talk about it. But with horses are quite capable of taking their tails all the way over their backs and easily from side to side if they're relaxed with the idea of having their tail handled. But if you leave handling a horse's tail till the day you want to take its temperature, then you are likely to run into trouble. So get your horse used to having its tail lifted over its back and put down and drawn to either side. In a gentle way, you're not forcing this. This is a muscle that can be damaged, a series of muscles that can be damaged, and so you need to give thought to that. If it was, for instance, a foal or a small pony, it actually, certainly with foals, it's often easier to lift the tail because it's much lighter. Betty's tail here is quite heavy, and it's quite an effort for me to keep it lifted, and I'm not a weakling. So keep in mind what's best for the animal and what's best for you in terms of managing the situation. So I'm right-handed, so I would always be standing on the near side of the horse. And don't get me wrong, we need to train horses so that we can move around their bottoms, and we should be reading the signs that the horse is bothered by that. And we do a lot of training to get horses used to us in a way, handling all parts of them from all angles, so that we're not going to be creeping around worrying about getting kicked. That said, I think I've been kicked once in my life when I was putting a tail bandage on a mare prior to being covered by a stallion, and I was behind the horse putting a tail bandage on because it's physically impossible to not stand behind the horse and put a tail bandage on, and I sensed her butt cheeks clamp I went to step away and she promptly got me both barrels in my chest. Now, people have been killed for accidents like that. I was lucky, I just got starfished and winded and it wasn't a pleasant experience, but I lived to tell the tale. So it's a lesson that they are capable of causing us damage, and you've always got to have that in the back of your mind. But ultimately you train your horse prior to the day you need to take its temperature, because if you don't, it's actually not fair on the horse that you're wanting to do something that it's unfamiliar with in a hurry, and particularly if the horse is off colour and not feeling terribly well. So the area under the horse's tail, my hands are cold today. It's a sunshiny day and my hands are cold, so I gently put my hand under her tail, and it's actually a good hand warming position. So if you think of it from her perspective, and she looks pretty calm there, she's having a little semi-snooze with Lisa. I can tell from the fact that although she moves her body a little bit, it's more that she's, I think, bothered about what the other ponies are doing. But get used to touching your horse and feeling whether your horse leans into the pressure that you're putting on it, whether as I go to lift her tail gently, whether she goes to clamp it. And if the horse goes to clamp the tail, just pause for a moment. Show the horse that you recognise it was troubled by that it felt the need to protect its nether regions, and take a moment and do it in stages until you get to a comfortable spot for yourself and the horse. And I might need Sean to move a little bit, because we're going to talk about the area beneath the horse's tail. And Betty here is a female, so for the purposes of those of you that aren't familiar with looking under a horse's tail, you have the anus, which is the exit from her digestive tract, and then you have the vulva, that's the exit from her reproductive tract. And you need to be going into this top one. It's not difficult to get it when you're dealing with male horses, but in females, we have had people who've got a little confused, and that's perfectly understandable unless you've had somebody talk you through these things. We've had some people who've never actually looked under the tail of their horses. So all of this skin here that doesn't have hair, it's all very sensitive. Horses are very sensitive, and this area, you can imagine it doesn't get touched very often unless you are, and in an ideal world you would be, cleaning this area on a daily basis. Then a lot of horses are not familiar with you being in that area, and you've got to be mindful of that. So practice it a lot. Do clean your horse's anal area daily. And then there's not going to be too much trouble when you need to take a temperature. Now, in days gone by, and I'll get past, I've been around a while. I used to teach students, and I dug this out of Father's greenhouse. We had glass thermometers, and it still terrifies me, the thought of allowing students to stick one of these into a horse's bottom. And I used to have long stretches of ribbon to prevent it disappearing forever and never to be found again. I'm joking, hopefully. Thankfully, we don't have to use these things anymore. It's part of technology that we've moved on, and we've got several options, but we kind of go for the big ones, mainly because they're more easily found, and there's certainly no chance at all of you losing that in a horse's rectum, unless you were being very ambitious. So, in terms of lubricant, yes, you might have your very handy pot of petroleum jelly handy. If you don't, then there's nothing like a bit of spit that will lubricate something, but it's better for the horse if you look at something that is going to lubricate. I've got a funny scowling. Have we got a problem? That's okay. Right, I'll carry on. So, we need to be inserting into the rectum, and as I say, running parallel or closely parallel to the ground. I will pop a little bit of lube on this, and the beauty of these magic devices, which they really are, there's nothing like digital these days, is that it does everything for you. So as long as you insert the device into the rectum sufficiently far, and the fact that it widens and becomes bigger is telling you that you're at the hilt. And even the smaller ones, they're there to make you realise that you've gone far enough. So certainly you wouldn't be aiming for any more than half of the length of a normal small thermometer. you've got to fire it up and you will get low setting and the flashing degree C. Gently take the horse's tail to one side, and the bottom line is it's a sphincter muscle. It doesn't like things entering it, so you've got to be gentle, but at the same time there's got to be a little bit of purpose to what you're doing. So I will just gently put it there, and you can see how she's lifted her tail and is continuing to lift her tail as I gently rotate it and pop it in. And then I'm going to very slightly put it to one side, so I tend to put my fingers rest them on the side of her butt cheek, and then hold it to one side so that the thermometer is taking the temperature of the wall of the rectum and not the air or perhaps droppings that are in the wall of that rectum. And you can see that it's very quickly picked it up, and we've got to wait because I can't remember. I'm pretty sure this one bleeps. Some bleep, some flash, some don't do anything, but usually it takes about 30 seconds for you to get a correct reading, and you've got to wait it out. So we'll wait it out and see. Sometimes you wonder whether you've given up or the batteries have gone or whatever. I have a feeling this one might not bleep. Should have thought of that before we started. It's reading 37.7. I don't know whether you can see that on the camera, but I would say the time that it's taken now, we're going to have as accurate a reading as we're going to get. And so I will gently withdraw, and we'll clean this later, but we'll just get rid of the Vaseline on her tail. So she's reading at 37.7 degrees. What I would say is, although some of, and certainly the older books, will say that a horse's temperature is 37.5 to 38.5. We don't have, I don't think in the last 10 years of taking temperatures, at least 10 years, we don't have a single horse that comes in over 38 degrees. The majority sit around 37.7 to 37.8. And we would take the temperature once a week for 3 or 4 weeks at the same time and get a baseline. So I'm pretty sure her baseline temperature is 37.8, so it's slightly lower than we would have her baseline temperature, but we can recheck that. Some would advocate doing it every day, and that's fine. Do it every day for 3 or 4 days and then take an average and then decide that that's your horse's temperature. If it changes very slightly from that, once you've got your baseline, and we would actually, if our baseline had never gone below 37.8, and the day we thought there was something wrong with the horse and we took its temperature and it was 37.9, we would pay attention. So just that tiny change, when we'd never seen that level before, would set alarm bells. And we have had a strangles outbreak here, and taking temperatures early on horses that we thought were showing signs of not being well allowed for isolation, and it prevented it going much wider than it needed to. So knowing your horse and knowing the maximum baseline temperature that horse has ever offered you is really, really important. Hopefully that will help you. It's basically, if you have a little bit of difficulty inserting the thermometer, it may be that there are droppings just in the entrance, and you may need to wait 10 minutes and then go back again and everything will be fine. Obviously, practice this before your horse becomes ill. This should be second nature to you, and anybody who cares for horses, nice big sigh, anybody who cares for horses should be very familiar with the procedure. And there's nothing cooler than being able to call your vet and say, my horse is a little bit off colour, the temperature is this, the heart rate is this, the breathing rate is this, and the vet immediately thinks, oh, I've got somebody who's fairly useful, I need to take on board what they're saying, and it will help them make decisions. Hope that works. Okay, bye for now.